Okay, next one we're going to talk about is the ontological argument. This is the thinking God into existence argument, right? We talked about this one in class too, right? We saw this in Descartes. Descartes got to the point where he was like, look, the only thing that I really know is that I exist, and I'm a thinking thing, right? But he was really concerned that he might be might be radically deceived by an evil demon. So, to really, really truncate the meditations, right? What did he do? He realizes he has an idea of God and that God is a perfect being. God has all the perfections. One of the perfections is existence. And so if he can think of God, then God must exist, right? Because God's perfect. And if you're thinking of a perfect thing, then you're thinking of something that exists. Because again, perfection is a existence is a perfection. And so then Descartes' like, woohoo, I got God. And then from there, he sort of built his way back up, right? And he got his ability to rely on reason and sensation and all this other stuff. But anyways, we talked about that in class. But the ontological argument is an argument like that, right? It's if you can think of God, then she exists. So let's talk about that. This is an attempt to provide a proof, right? This is not an argument style where what you're trying to do is go, hey, the most likely explanation of what's going on is that there's a God. If this kind of argument works, it's a formal like proof for the existence of God. We see this in Saint Anselm. Again, Rene Descartes famously gives one of these in his meditations. Alvin Plantinga is probably he is the contemporary philosopher that gives you these kind of arguments. He does these in terms of modal logic and claims about possible universes and possibility. And so he basically argues from if it's possible that God exists, then God must exist, kind of thing. But that's beyond this class. So in Anselm's argument, he's arguing something like the following, right? If God exists, then she would be perfect, right? And that makes sense, right? I mean, God is supposed to be the perfect being, right? God is, supposed to have all the perfections, right? God is all powerful, all knowing, all wonderful, all loving, all good, right? God is perfect if there's a God. So there's your first premise. And then he says, look, now if you're a perfect being, right, then you have all the perfections. You have every property that a thing would have that would make it perfect. So if there's something that makes you more perfect, you should have that property. Just in virtue of the definition, right? A perfect being has all the perfections. So if there's a God, God's a perfect being, and if there is a perfect being, then by definition that would have all the perfections. Then he says existence is a perfection. If something exists, it is more perfect than something that doesn't exist, right? A existent God would be more perfect than a non-existent God. That makes sense, right? Again, if existence is a perfection, and if God is the thing that has all the perfections, then if we can think of God, we are thinking of something that has all the perfections. So by necessity, we are thinking of something that has the property of existing, right? So if you can think of God, God exists, right? And that's basically the way the argument goes, right? Is again, all these perfections, if they could be held in an idea, that would be God, right? The perfect being would be God. God would have every single perfection. So if you can literally think of God, you're thinking of something that exists. But if then God exists, right? So if you can think of God, she exists. That's the argument. If it goes wrong, it's really hard often to see where exactly it goes wrong. Um, People sometimes will use the perfect island example, right? Or the perfect unicorn, right? Well, I can think of a perfect unicorn, and an existent unicorn or existent island would be more perfect than a non-existent island. Those arguments, says Anselm, say people that defend this kind of argument don't work for the well-formed version of this argument, because what this argument is supposed to do is be giving us the one concept, perfection itself, right? There's like, if you can think of the perfect being, there's not like, if you can think of like the perfect mouse or the perfect wife or perfect child or perfect dog or whatever, like, or the perfect drink. Those things don't have to have the property of existing, right, in order to be the perfect thing, right? Like I can imagine a perfect cat, right, and it would have all sorts of features, but it's not built into the definition of the perfect cat that it must exist, right? It's just, it would be better if that perfect cat existed. But God is different as an idea. Again, if there's a God. A God is supposed to be perfect being itself. And so to think of the perfect being is to think of something that exists. It's a part of the definition. In the same way that if there's a God, God would have to be all powerful, right? A being that is only kind of powerful would be a demigod. It wouldn't be God, right? And so if there is like a perfect being, it would have all the perfections. And if you can think of God, if you can genuinely think of a God, then you are thinking of something that has the property of existing. That's the argument. Therefore, that God must exist if you can think of it. If this goes wrong, it's not the perfect island objection or the perfect unicorn that defeats it. It would have to be something else. Anyways, that's the ontological argument. Have a good one.